Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Loren Feldman. Today, I'm here with Shawn Busse, CEO of Kinesis, and we're doing another in our series of marketing workshops. As we explained the last time we did this, the idea here is to focus on one of the biggest pain points business owners have, but with the idea that there's no magic bullet. So today, I think we're probably going to end up talking a lot about digital marketing. There's a lot of jargon involved in this. Could you walk me through a couple of these? Let me just start with one I just heard that I wasn't familiar with. What's CAC?
Yeah, CAC it sounds terrible. Sounds like it might be a disease, but it's really just customer acquisition cost. You know, how much are you spending to get a customer? You're also probably going to hear some terms like LTV. That's lifetime value. So what is a customer worth not only when they buy a product or a service from you today, but what's it worth over the lifetime that they are with your company?
Because if you're thinking about how much you're spending to get that customer, you want to know what you're going to get back over the lifetime.
That's right, over the lifetime. You're probably going to hear CPG, which is consumer packaged goods. Think about when you go into the grocery store, all the stuff on the shelves, those are CPG items. Our guest today has a lot of CPG stuff. The last one I think you'll probably hear is DTC. And so that is direct to consumer, meaning rather than going through the grocery store to get your customers, a manufacturer actually sells straight to the consumer, usually through the internet. So direct to consumer has been a real kind of rage for the last, 10 years or so.
So again, the idea behind these conversations is that because there's no magic bullet marketing solution, we want to just try to workshop it and talk to business owners and entrepreneurs about the strategies they've tried, what's worked and what hasn't. Today, we're going to talk to Jeff Braverman, who calls himself Chief Nut at a family-owned business called nuts.com. I've known him for more than 10 years now. We wrote about him when I was at the New York Times, when his business was much smaller. He's got an amazing story of taking a business that his father and uncle were running, a little failing retail nut shop, turning this business into an internet juggernaut and doing that without taking any outside capital. Is there anything in particular you're hoping to hear from Jeff today?
I mean, it's amazing, because he's gone from what looks to be like maybe a 4-person retail store to a maybe 500-person company, somewhere in that range. That's doing everything from manufacturing to fulfillment to marketing of the offering. And so I want to hear about that journey, especially how to transition in a family-run business, because that's often a super hard thing to do.
All right. As usual, this episode is brought to you by our principal sponsor, The Great Game of Business. Let's get started. Welcome, Jeff. To start, could you give us a sense of how big a business nuts.com is?
Certainly bigger than we last spoke years ago. But we're well into the stratosphere, let's put it that way. I think when we first met, we were probably doing $30-something million or something like that. So we're doing multiples of that now.
How many employees do you have?
Probably about 500 or so.
Wow.
You have a wonderful story about how you actually got into the nut business. You went to school, you went to Wharton, you got a job on Wall Street with an investment bank. Then what happened?
I gave that about 6 months, 7 months. And I just decided I wanted to build something. I wanted to do something special and a little bit more socially redeeming. I grew up in a little nut store that my grandfather started in 1929. And I just had an idea. Years before I graduated, I was a freshman in college. I did start what became nuts.com, but at the time it was called nutsonline.com. I left banking. My dad and my uncle, as you know, told me I was nuts. Literally, I'm not kidding. Because I was, making more money than they were and doing great in my career. I just had a belief in myself and I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And the rest became history. We still had modest expectations and we blown through all of them.
What year was this where you started nutsonline.com?
That started in early 1999, and then I joined the business full-time in 2003.
So that's before the dot-com bubble burst.
Correct.
Early days on the internet.
Very early. Not that many people were buying nuts online then. Orders would trickle in, a few orders here and there. And it was like the most exciting thing in the world to my 4-person family business.
Yeah, I remember when in those early days too, it was like there was just so much hesitation about putting your credit card online. Like just getting over that threshold was like a big barrier back then.
100%. And even if you fast forward a bunch of years, it was still a barrier. You just have all these assurances on the side. We would do A/B testing showing credit cards and credit cards accepted and, these Norton, secure, whatever stuff, to try to, mitigate and allay people's fears. I don't think those are as necessary these days.
What was your basic idea for how you were going to find customers and how the customers were going to find you when the internet was just getting started?
Yeah, so early on, it was hard. There wasn't even a Google that you could pay. Maybe there's a Google, but you couldn't pay them. AdWords didn't exist. So I actually started out, for example, this was, and I know he's passed, but Tony Hsieh from Zappos had this company called Link Exchange. And you would like put banners and share banners and pay commissions and stuff like that. That's how I started driving people. But then SEO also. Organic search was an easy thing those days, and you could manipulate and rank very high just by doing some very basic things on the page. Then there was a tool called GoTo, which became Overture, which then got bought by Yahoo. So these were like pay-per-click. So yeah, I date myself here. And then obviously the Holy Grail became Google.
It's like a history of the internet.
When I came into the business this was like February of 2003, I didn't know that the internet was going to be the end all be all for a little store. I actually thought the opportunity was to sell to a supermarket who started buying from us. But after a few months, I just really wanted to lean into where we could, differentiate ourselves and realize it was online, and then put together strategy, rebuilt the website. There were technical hurdles to really, go after advertising online. And we launched, of course, this stuff always takes longer than you expect. Relaunched on December 4th of that year. And I told the developer who I hired him when I was a sophomore in college, and he's still with us today.
Wow.
But I said, it's Christmas time. Let's go. We launched, and it was like the fire hose opened up type of a thing where the volume just exploded. But we just then had, a strategy on how to advertise on Google. And what we realized really early on was budget. What budget? Right? If there are returns, you just find the money and you spend it. And also then, and this is a big challenge for lots of people, especially these startups over the last couple of years, it's just like, CACs were just nothing. We actually got to the point where we were grandfathered in with some platforms for like a penny, bids for a penny. Eventually they graduated those things to be 10 cents or 25 cents or whatever. But what I did, the early secret to our success beyond just like we already were ranking organically was really understanding Google. There's a guy who wrote one of the first books on Google, and instead of me running the campaigns, I decided let me hand it off to him. And for several $100s a month, it was actually, I remember it was about $600 a month. He didn't know what his worth was. And then it was just like completely off to the races.
Yeah, I remember that time, we were doing SEO back in 2005, and, it was B2B, but it still worked very similarly where, if you created content, you just put a lot of content out there with the right keywords, you could really drive a lot of business. And there just wasn't the competition. They were sort of like halcyon days, such a great time if you were ahead of everybody else.
Yeah. And then we used the tools. So when I came into the business, we maybe had think of like a little nut dried fruit candy store, 150 products or so. Today we have thousands of products, but we leveraged the tools. So we would use, again, even before Google, we used another keyword tool, and it would tell us how many searches are there for this thing in a given month. We would take supplier catalogs, dump it in to the tool, and just start scaling the offering. If X number of people are searching for this thing, God bless, let's sell it and see how it goes. And it was a very simple, strategy, but it worked.
Just stepping back a minute, I run into a lot of second generation business owners where the parents are still involved. And it sounds like you've faced kind of a common situation where there's a status quo, there's a way of working. It was, boots on the ground, retail presence, and you had a vision and a transformation you wanted to bring about. How did you navigate your big ideas and change and all that, and also manage your relationship with your family?
Yeah. It's a great question. And I think I was lucky and had a little bit of a special situation here, because I think often, whether it's a strong patriarch or a matriarch, but there's someone strong who's reluctant to cede control to the next generation. Mm-hmm. I've had unique relationships with my dad where, like, in high school, I was investing his money and managing his money. So there was something a little bit different there. I did come home in my freshman year of college. I put together a little business plan. My dad and my uncle had probably never had a business plan to, try something with the internet. They gave me a very small budget. It did cost me more than that. But they had strong belief in me. Mm. Like I said, when I decided to come into the business, and this was exciting. I'll speak for my dad. He's just a creature of habit. When the store was actually struggling. So when there were no customers on a Saturday, he'd be nervous. And when it was right before Christmas and really busy, he'd be equally nervous. and just, a reluctance to change and kind of, set in their ways. My grandfather was the exact same way. My dad told me that when he came into the business, he wanted to put in display cases in the store. This was like old school. You had to know what to ask for. You couldn't even see the product. Mm. And it took my dad years, and finally cried to his mom. And finally, she said, Saul, listen to him and give it a shot. And they finally put in display cases and sales went up. So I think, he probably forgot a little bit of that once I came into the business. But he was certainly more open-minded. And one thing uniquely that they did was they gave me the keys in a much more generous way than would normally happen. Mm-hmm. And there were challenges. Like at some point I said, hey, we need QuickBooks. And I remember distinctly, it was about $299 at the time. And my dad said, let's wait for business to be a little bit better. And I just said no. And he just had no choice because I just bought it, right? Mm-hmm. We were dead and on Saturdays in the retail store. I put together the case and said, hey, we need to close. We're actually not making any money on Saturdays. And their response was, well, Poppy Saw would never let us close. And, they wanted to start with a half a day. And sometimes I just dug in and they didn't have the fight in them. But then what happened was things worked. So our business was not a good business, was not making much money. And then we start growing and it becomes super exciting. Yes. When we turned on that website again, the new version in December 4th, 2003, my dad actually said, shut it off because it was too much business and he was scared.
Scared he couldn't fulfill it?
Just nervous. Yeah. And it's like, we got this, we had, a silly example, but we had a wholesale customer. We had to have a wholesale business because the retail store was just, going down and down each year. And, I just visited them, asked them questions, said, how can we help you? They're like, well, we really love packaging. Will you package for us? My dad and my uncle said, no, too much labor. Because for them, they didn't want to think about hiring people. And I showed them the map. I was like, oh my gosh, we can make retail margins at wholesale volumes. Let's go. So I was the person who packed it, right? And just kind of drag them along. But then it starts getting faster. And then we start hiring people and it worked. We grew this business very quickly and profitably. And so I think that covers up a lot of stuff, but I think there was a deep love and respect that they had for me, which is I'm not saying that's not in other places, but they were much more trusting. And then, one, to my dad's credit and all of his stubbornness in life, because he's pretty dogmatic, it was, he pledged that if wasn't expecting to have a kid to come in the business, he had to kind of go into the business. But if he did, he would, give them a lot more latitude. So very quickly, that retail store of ours got bulldozed in 2005.
Wow.
That was 50% of our business. Fortunately, we had the internet.
That's a symbolic moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was there to save the day. And, again, things work. We grew 50% a year for 10 years or whatever it was. And, got paid before we paid our suppliers. It just was a model that worked.
You were in your 20s at that point when you were sort of hustling hard?
Yeah. So I came in when I was, 20, started full time when I was 23.
Wow.
And then within, we get bulldozed, we moved to a bigger facility. I was nervous it was too big. Well, we took over the neighboring facility two years later. Then we had to move out again. And then, we scaled tremendously. Now we've got facilities all over the country. But right. We really hit our groove. 3-4 years in, we're really hitting our groove and growing nicely.
At what point did you start thinking that you had regrets about the name nutsonline.com and decide to go after nuts.com?
Yeah. So never regrets. I had no money, right? I couldn't even contemplate buying a domain that was already taken. And those were candidly, those were, less appropriate sites at the time that you would even want to be thinking about. So nutsonline.com was actually my 7th choice, but the previous 6 were all taken at the time. But then there was always in the back of my head, I had files from 2005 because then domains by proxy came out and you didn't know who owners were of websites, but I had files from an old computer, which told me who the owner was. So I have that going back from 2005 of nuts.com. So it's always in the back of my head. There were small instances like in 2008, we made these Tully circles with Jordan almonds for a Rachel Ray show. And I helped tie the damn bows. And at the very end, she says, well, I really want to thank, we were nutsonline.com. She says, I really want to thank nuts.com for contributing these things. It's like, oh my God. And Loren knows all these details. It's a very long story, but I tried to buy it in 2008 and turned out the majority of the type in traffic was from a different country with a different search intent. So we passed and the seller wasn't really, super interested in selling for the price we offered. But then come 2011, we kind of had the foresight for where the world was headed. You can see this today where Amazon's done a very good job promoting Amazon. So we had a sense that the brand would become even more important. Mm-hmm. So it's just one of these things, active negotiation, end of 2011. I thought it was going to fail. Fortunately, worked out. And kind of the rest is history there.
You said that brand would become very important. That's one of those words that it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I would love for you just to articulate what it means to you and how you think about brand.
Yeah. And to be clear, we're in our infancy right now. To this day, we're doing deep brand research. And what is nuts.com? What can it be? Can it scale? Can it transcend just the word nuts? So I'm still not that smart, but we had a good business, right? We were doing tens of millions of dollars under nutsonline.com. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't complain, far greater than, my junior year of college. My goal was 10 orders a day, right? That's much bigger scale than that. And, I just saw like basic stuff just from a retention standpoint, right? It's just easier. It's 4 letters. It's more memorable, nuts.com versus nutsonline.com. You can imagine from a competitive threat standpoint, it's just all around just a better name. Gives it much greater weight and authority if you think about it. So if someone's looking in a search results and they're trying to buy a nut product and it's nuts.com, it's more weighty than more trust than just nuts online. But again, we were always trying to be personable. And when we rebranded, this wasn't, hey Jeff, just use your college friend anymore to do the design work. This is like, hey, let's invest. We're spending a lot of money on this domain. Let's go out and find some of the best in the business on kind of the brand identity and the surrounding imagery and so on.
Jeff, I believe it's been reported in part by places where I've been employed how much you spent. Do you mind telling us again how much you spent for nuts.com?
Sure, because you could Google it. ChatGPT probably knows it.
ChatGPT will tell you, yeah.
It was never supposed to get out, but it got out. That's $700,000.
And that's $2011.
Correct.
I mean, it wasn't that long before that you were negotiating $299 for QuickBooks.
Yeah.
How did writing that check feel? How big a risk was that for you at the time?
Well, it wasn't like a bet the house or anything like that, to be clear. We were already doing really well. Mm-hmm. So it was still, right, like our profit could handle it. Let's put it that way. So it wasn't like this massive financial gamble that was going to make us insolvent. But I had conviction. I believed. I was trying to justify the math, and it was like, well, if you improve your retention rate by 1%, then all this stuff. But it's all BS. I was saying, well, what if you could hire employees better? Like, is it a better brand that resonates with people you go to hire? Then, right, you could get a return if you just hire that one person. So I just had long-term conviction, and basically, right, there's no math to this. But I was like, you know what? If it pays off in 10 years, right? Like, I had confidence it would do that. Obviously, Loren, as you know, our organic rankings tanked for the first couple of months, which made me panic because Google had to figure its stuff out. And then they came roaring back. And I don't remember the exact math I did back then, but I figured it did pay back in about 6 months. So it ultimately worked out well.
I'd love for you to talk about your journey of going from these like early scrappy days when you're like, I've got to like pinch every penny and be really cautious, to a place where you're like, I'm gonna take a flyer on this thing. And when are the right times to be thinking bigger like that?
Yeah. It's a good question. Look, I think what's been imbued in me from the day I was born was frugality. It doesn't stop even now. We've scaled our, our payroll probably by 10x that in the last year or so. So like to give you perspective, but there's still just this high degree of frugality. I would say my dad was more penny wise, pound foolish. I'm trying to be penny wise and pound wise, and that's how I've been. So for that was like a big number, but again, it wasn't bet the farm, right? Mm-hmm. And like it wasn't like it was worth $0. It's worth something. So it was just like, but it came down to gut because I did math, but like who the heck knows what would have happened. So I think I just believed. And sometimes I think an entrepreneur, definition of entrepreneur is someone who takes risks with limited information, right? Right. Right. And that's what I did. But again, I was never going to create existential risk. I can't remember what our profit was then, right? I don't know what my frame of mind was then. But I think we were at the scale where like we wouldn't miss it. Mm-hmm. So that was certainly helpful.
But that wasn't the sum total of your investment at that point. As I think you were starting to say before when you were talking about brand, I think you made a decision that it wasn't just buying the domain name. You were going to invest in the brand. And I think you're probably talking about the graphic design, which
Correct. Which wasn't cheap, but still orders of magnitude less. But yes, there's a lot of work and you have to reprint all your assets, but those were still small compared to the $700,000. But I can tell you, we did lean in. Right, didn't go cheap on the brand agency. And one of the best feedback we got afterwards, or the most consistent feedback was, oh my God, your boxes are absolutely incredible. Because we went nuts on the boxes, right? We had fun with it. And we always had these cutesy cartoon characters because I kind of built this business in my image. And I liked cartoon characters and I wanted to make it be personable and have a connection with the customer. And lean in, we did. And this is a business where we still are. We're on a direct response model. Right, we're not putting much money out there for branding in terms of budget and so on. This is we put in X and we get back Y. So that was like a little bit more of a leap than a lot of the other stuff.
So along those lines of taking risk, which is something I love to talk about in terms of what makes a good decision, you took some other risks. So you're over here tinkering with the online space. You're really in this kind of like A test, B test, inputs, outputs, very what I would call kind of left brain activity. And then I was reading you did this thing like where you shipped a bunch of nuts to CBS and you have this kind of history of like these like goofy kind of ballsy moves that have no direct correlation to return on investment. And yet they made a difference in your business. Can you talk a little bit whether it's the Jericho thing or other examples like that? I feel like it's not an isolated incident either.
Yeah. And the Jericho example reminds me of, sometimes I listen to How I Built This Podcast by Guy Raz, and he always asks how much of this was like hard work and smarts and so on versus luck. And I think I'm not going to be smart enough to answer that well, but I think luck presents. You have to be open to receiving the luck. Yeah. And in the case of Jericho, this was a long time ago. It's probably 15 years ago or so. But long story short, a show was being canceled on CBS. It's a long story, but fans decided to send nuts in protest. I had never seen the show. I see some orders come in and we have a fraud system. I was like, it's getting tripped up as fraud. And start poking around and just latched onto this thing where, again, mind you, it took me several weeks before watching even the show because I finally did have to watch it. But like, I had never posted on a blog. We launched a blog. We put up, I remember when I was, when you see fundraisers, it's like a thermometer and when the red go up, we were saying, hey, let's raise $4,000 in that's the campaign. And 40,000 pounds later, and, we donated, we raised $20,000 for shirts and whatever. We donated all those types of money. We just like wrapped our head around these things. Yes. For about 3 weeks, I didn't sleep, taking interviews at midnight and hopping in a truck and driving a truckload to CBS.
Were those nuts paid for, or were you were donating those nuts?
No. So what we did was people started buying a pound of something and then shipping's expensive. So what we did was say, hey, we became a facilitator. We became like the focal point of a campaign. We're going to put in $25, put in $100. We're going to give it to you at the wholesale price and we're going to ship this in bulk, 25-pound cases. Hell, we were like, We were freshly roasting. These were gorgeous peanuts. And then they realized they wanted to ship it to another executive in LA. So I was like, you guys, this ain't leaving me. So then I arranged with a company in LA to do the final delivery for us. So we were still the focal point of this campaign. And what's interesting is they brought the show back. They flew me out for the fall lineup party in LA. And I'm in the season 2 DVD, which is kind of funny. And mind you, like, I wasn't a fan. I thought these people were crazy at first. I had no idea what this was about. But then ultimately what happened was, we did analysis to say, hey, what do we gain from these customers? And it turned out these people were rabid fans, but didn't turn out to be rabid customers. There wasn't a lot of lifetime value there. But when you have links from the New York Times and all these other publications about this campaign, we then ended up, what did we do? We took that Jericho page where we had pictures and this blog and all this stuff going. We ended up just saying, okay, let's put that page somewhere else and let's take that page and redirect it to our nuts page. And then our rankings went up. Yeah. So we did maneuver it once this whole thing died down. But I think it's just being open, right, and flexible, and being able to pounce when you have you sense there's some opportunity. I didn't expect it to be crazy like that.
Did you have the help of a public relations firm through any of that, or did you just wing it all yourself?
No, what we had was a couple of programmers, and then we had kind of a designer, and we just I didn't sleep much. I was to be honest, some guy was like, hey, we want to interview you. I had no idea who he was. Turned out he was a major person in this campaign. I had no idea. I would just get on the call. I was reluctant. I was I'm tired. I got on, and then that spawned I was on K-Rock, and all this other stuff happened. And suddenly, you go to the supermarket and you saw me in the National Enquirer. I was like, what? I was like, are you kidding? Are you kidding me?
This is such a cool story from a lot of marketing concepts. You saw something in the data, right? Which was, wow, why are these nuts getting delivered to CBS? What's up with that? And then you kind of scratched at that. And you learn more and you learn more. And then pretty soon you found that there's a community out there that's really passionate about something. It's not nuts, but somehow you got tied into that. And then the ancillary benefits to that far outstripped the nuts that they ordered or the passion that they had in the moment. It's really about the long game there. What are some other examples that you can share of this is another kind of pillar of our marketing foundation that we developed over time?
And I'll give you something that's much more recent.
Yeah.
So all these D2C businesses, now so many are struggling, but so many of these things, everyone thought they were God during the first year of the pandemic. All these CPG startups calling me, bragging about how great their acquisition strategy is on Facebook.
They're genius business people, right?
Oh, yeah. And I would interview people too. It's what did you do, right? What did COVID do versus what did you do? But we had a sense for what was happening with the pandemic before most people. We have a chocolate business, and it had some product in Singapore, believe it or not, some packaged product. And they had said, oh, thank you so much. This is helping us tremendously in our quarantine. This was in February of 2020.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what? I heard of Wuhan. What the heck? I never heard of a quarantine in Singapore. So we're already moving. I remember because it was a leap year. February 29th, we sent out an email to customers, which was early. And we said, hey, something's going on. It was just guys, stock up. We're going to waive shipping. It's free shipping, no minimum. Just stock up. Something's coming. Mm. And then, for the next 3 months, I lived in the plant. And this is where I'm in YPO, Young Presidents Organization, and my peers were like, Jeff, you've got this substantial business, sometimes much bigger than ours, and you're the CEO. You need to stay home and protect yourself. And I was like, that's not the business I built, and I'm not going to let my people assume risk I'm not willing to assume. So I literally was in the plant for the first 3 months, just picking and packing orders because it was hard being in New Jersey. These were tough times.
Yeah.
March and April, right? That was the epicenter in the United States. So, we struggled. We had 70% worker call out at our worst moment in time. We hired maybe 1,000 temps over a matter of months and so on. But then, we put on a night shift. It collapsed because workers were too scared to be by the temps and so on and so forth. We scaled again. And then, kind of the third week of April, I read an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think, that was saying something like the big boys entertainment and hospitality and my car manufacturers were all pulling off a TV. I'm picking orders in the warehouse, doing manual labor. And I called a guy I know, who was very smart and connected. I said, we need to get on TV. Because while I was working, all my friends were home. Everyone was home just watching TV. I'm sure you remember. Everyone was. The challenge is all those people watching TV were also baking breads. And that means they were buying, we sell flowers. We were selling truckloads of flowers. Right?
Oh, wow.
Even though
okay.
we're nuts.com, but like, you know, one of our best sellers is a dried mango. People are buying all this stuff and quinoa, grains, all that type of stuff. I said, we need to launch TV in now. And with the first week of May 2020, we launched TV. So like when I look at this, the growth of the business as a result of the pandemic, 50% was free. And I don't say that lightly because my team, we worked very hard just to keep up with the volume and keep people healthy and keep this thing running. Because we were probably 5 minutes from having to shut down the factory. It was that hard to keep people there. But so like I would say 50% was, hey, market forces. But the other 50% was we leaned in when everyone was, you know, terrified. When Amazon was shipping, I don't know if you remember, but like it would take two to 4 weeks to get some stuff from Amazon early on in the pandemic. Right? We were still, you know, shipping 50% of our orders the same day. Right? We kept this. Yes, we had to restrict demand and do all this craziness because we didn't have enough human beings. We manufacture this stuff. We're not just buying something and then shipping it. We're packaging every 100% in-house. We're roasting. We're doing the chocolates and so on.
Oh, wow.
It's not a business you want to have. It's this high labor intensive, huge number of SKUs. You had to keep people apart, right? So they didn't get sick. And a lot of stuff is hand packed because we have so many SKUs and they're small runs. Like not everything's packed on a machine. Yeah, not a great place to be. But we rose to the occasion and literally launched TV, which became a huge percentage of our budget. And we got the learnings in. So it's like, you know, this opportunity presents itself and you just got to be open to it and seize it. Look, a week before I was having a nervous breakdown, like literally a nervous breakdown because I was getting very tired, physically working so many hours in the plant and then trying to save the whole business at night. But then we had some hope and then we stepped up and, you know, that was a really opportune time because for us, it's about the buy on TV. And there was no better time and probably, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
I didn't do this before, but in the last 30 years to get in and get your learnings in before CPMs normalized.
Did you get help with the TV? Like, did you, you know, at that point you were a bigger company, you probably had an agency that you were working with on a regular basis, or maybe you had an internal marketing team, or tell us a little bit about how you moved into a space you were totally unfamiliar with and managed to make it work. Yeah.
So I knew a guy, a smart marketer out externally. And I just, again, literally, I called him from the warehouse floor and I said, I need to launch and I need to launch now. He's like, I have one company identified, an agency. They'll do it all. They'll do creative. They'll do testing. They'll do strategy, analytics, and so on, and the buy. Well, we could go out to RFP, but that's going to take time. I said, no, we don't have time. This company had like they said they'll launch in 10 days type of a thing.
Wow.
And then they came back and said 2 weeks. I said, no, you promised 10 days. And we then went to war internally where before we had a kickoff, we prepared every possible asset, anything they could think of so that we could hit the ground running. I think we spoke with them on a Thursday. They wrote a script on Friday. And this is where I didn't know what I was doing. We didn't know exactly what we were doing. So I told my team, let's be quiet. These are the experts. Yes, we think we have opinions and stuff, but shut up. We're going to launch. Sunday, I remember I had some this is sitting outside with friends because, you know, couldn't be inside with people. I remember pulling away because they already were showing me this cartoon thing. They spun up super fast and we were just commenting on minor things and then launched a few days later. So it was really, really incredible. But no, leveraged an agency. This is something that is very hard to ever be able to do in-house, even at massive scale. So was your instinct to go to TV so much as you felt like there was just fresh customers to be had here? Was it that, you know, the Google search thing, you were starting to kind of run out of runway in terms of your cost per lead and cost per acquisition? Tell us more about your thinking there. Yes, Google, I viewed Google, don't let the Google people hear this, but I view Google as a morphine trip for years now. You gotta just pay to play. And it's is it incremental or not? But at that point in time, Google was an unbelievable channel, right? It was an unbelievable channel for everyone because the audience just exploded, right? Conversion rates and then conversions went through the roof. So no, to me, it was just fundamentally holy crap, the world is our oyster. This is an opportunity to acquire so many more customers and then a supply and demand imbalance. Everyone's watching TV and the advertisers are pulling off. So you have a buying opportunity, not arbitrage because we're not selling, but you could buy on the cheap. And it was one of these things. Let's go. Let's move super fast. I don't love the buzzword like the MVP acronym, which is I don't know if that's still a buzzword or not, but minimum viable product. But this was like, let's go. Let's apologize later. Let's break things and let's launch. But then it opened my eyes. I was like, okay, great. If Google's really performant now and TV is really performant, well, why the hell isn't Facebook performant? And I had a junior team at the time working on this stuff. And, I didn't know Facebook super well. We've been on Facebook forever, but I'm always skeptical of the Facebook. Look, I've been advertising on Facebook since probably you first could pay them in 2005. And I've seen them become opaque and they don't show you results and they take credit for everything. And suddenly with iOS 14.5, it became like this wake up call. But I was just listening to my team and they're like, well, here's the ramp up and here's the, the CAC and LTV analysis. And I was just like, bullshit. Like if Google's working and TV's working, there's got to be something for Facebook. So then it didn't last long, to be honest. But then we scaled the hell out of it after the summer. So we launched TV in May. I think in September, we went after Facebook aggressively, and that was like massively performant. That lasted only so long. I think we started seeing reversion to the mean by February. And then that summer, Facebook died because of the Apple changes.
Yeah.
But to me, it's so much of my success in business. One thing is I was the customer. So I always have the customer first mindset because I like eating this stuff. We have delicious stuff and like cute cartoon characters, great quality, freshness, quick delivery. Like we've got 5 distribution centers around the country because I want stuff quickly. And I think the second thing is it's a lot of common sense and you just connect the dots in places. So again, that example, TV is working. Google's working, right? Everyone's on Facebook too because they got nothing to do. Be conservative. So if you don't believe it fully, it's very hard to figure out attribution. It's only getting harder. And when we launched, it was like the CACs, the acquisition costs were just so low. It didn't matter if it was right or not.
You gave 2 examples there. One in which you said, hey, let's just trust these professionals. We got to go. And that was, your TV experience, right? And the other example you just gave was like, I don't trust what my team is telling me. Maybe I'm simplifying it a little too much, but maybe you can help folks from your own experience how you think about decision making and how do you think about trust and when to go with your gut and when to rely on experts.
Yes, I'll answer this in a few ways. Recognize I'm still learning and I'm still a novice. At some point, I said, hey, I should hire an executive team. So I was the highest paid manual labor for far too long. Let's put it that way. And, I struggled. I said, how should I reinvest in this business? I struggled for years. I didn't know. And I should have invested in people. The problem is I didn't know how. And I didn't have confidence in myself in hiring the right people. So I did go on a crusade, start hiring people. And kind of the mistake I made was I certainly emphasized intelligence because that was easier for me to measure. There's a lot more to it than that. And so I probably over-indexed there, but some stuff was much more theoretical than practical. And you need to be able to execute. But I think then I was much more of a trust, like, hey, I'm bringing on these very intelligent people, just go. A few years later, I learned that you should really trust but verify. That's a newer principle. And for me now, it's like really try to spend a lot of time hiring great people. You bring someone in that's not good, fix it and fix it quickly, but then empower them, but still verify, right? And until people are ready. Because sometimes it's too much pressure. And like for me, I've got 20 plus years of deep institutional knowledge where for years I knew everything. And right, that doesn't scale. The other thing I did hire an advisor because I would get informed advice from people, but that's not enough. So I don't have a board of directors yet. One day I'll figure that out. But I think a little over 2 years ago, I did bring on an advisor. And it just gave me a lot of confidence because then when you go to make hiring decisions, there's someone else in your corner that understands the business, not just at a superficial level, but, like I was spending probably 4 hours a week with the advisor then. Mm-hmm. And like, even though I've done great in life, I'm still, like I said, a novice at this. And there's some things I'm really good at. There's some things I'm not. And that's where like, I had someone to talk to. Mm. And look, I'm in Young Presidents Organization where you have your kind of board, but like, it's a little different. We meet once a month for 4 hours, but they don't know the intimate details and the ins and outs, and they're learning too. But like that did help where then I had someone who I could go to for advice. I made a big move. We were thinking about how do we map my path out? What do I like doing and how do we get there? And he'd said, hey, in 3 years, you could focus on people, strategy, and then acquisitions, all of which sound good to me. And I said, why 3 years? I saw someone dynamic along the way, and then we hired a president. So well ahead of what we were planning to do it. But like I begin to have the structure in place and the advice to help make these right decisions.
Nice.
So I don't know if that exactly answered it, but like in my heart of hearts, I want to just delegate, and that's different. Most people are reluctant to cede control. I probably am too trusting of people, right? Hence that emphasis on being able to verify. But I think what we're trying to do is how do you create a culture and environment where things are, give guidance from up top, but let the team set their objectives, let them feel empowered, turn people loose.
I think you mentioned that you are doing some kind of deep brand research. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, and this is some area where people had to twist my arm to do it because I didn't fully understand it, and it's expensive, and I don't see immediate returns, and so my brain doesn't work like that. But can we, to become $1 billion business, can we do that as nuts.com?
That's the goal?
There's no real, it's like, hey, how do we keep this going for 90 years is probably the real goal, and do great work with great people. For me, there's less about an endpoint. It's more about the journey. But sure, you got to put numbers up to inspire people. But let's put a number up there like that. There's a lot of people who just think that we sell nuts when that's a minority of our products. Can we, through branding work, can we stick with nuts.com or not? Can that take us to where we want to go? We have a gifting business. We have a gifting business that's substantial. Do we need to create a sister brand? But we don't know the exact structure of this, what's going to come out of this from a brand architecture standpoint, but do we need to elevate a brand there? We have a B2B business that's just really healthy. We have a chocolate business that actually has a retail brand. And how does this stuff all fit together? So we're doing this extensive research project to try to understand, again, where we can go and how do we get there, right? For me to try to move away, let's say, from the name nuts.com, right, I'm going to need a lot of convincing evidence because there is value there. And right, whether we like it or not, we have created a brand. I was just on a trip and many people came up to me and says, oh my God, I love nuts.com. Or it's my little secret store type of a thing. So there is stuff there, but we now need to be able to articulate it much better and architect this much better.
It sounds like as much as you've grown, you still see yourself as a little bit of a secret. So suggesting there's a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, these markets we serve are massive. That's why, when I think about what we need to do, it's less about Amazon and the competition because the mouths are there.
Is Amazon your main competition? Is that how you think of it?
Yes. Amazon's going to be everyone's. I hate to say it. Anyone who's got significant parts of GDP is going to be an Amazon competitor, right? Unless they get broken up.
Is there another business like yours, like nuts.com out there that fits the basic mold of what you're doing?
I would say that a lot more of them are like offline businesses versus online businesses. There's lots of smaller online businesses, but then again, we have a gifting business. There's many large gifting businesses or bigger gifting businesses, online. We operate on lots of different verticals, but I think at the end of the day, right, there's the wallet share, and if people are going to go buy stuff online, a lot of people go to Amazon. So how do you get the people who want better? And I think that's where we're going to figure out how to lean in.
Yeah, that seems to me like the real opportunity is Amazon seems to be in a bit of a tailspin in terms of quality and trust.
Correct. And food's an intimate thing.
Yeah, right.
We have this heritage, a real heritage. This is my grandfather started this store. Our suppliers, we've been doing this with our suppliers for generations. Most other people can't say that. And I think there's an opportunity for us to look, in my mind, we've won. Now it's like those still early innings. I think customers and people want better. They want to have a relationship. They want to trust. We're putting ice in our boxes as late as possible in the day so your stuff doesn't melt. You think your medjool dates that are coming from Amazon are stored in a 90 degree warehouse? We're shipping them with ice.
That's so cool. Well, I know we're coming up on time here, and we like to end this with a question for every guest, and that is the idea of good habits. And a lot of great marketing, which is what this show is about, is really about figuring out what are good habits and continuing to beat the drum. And I'm curious, what are your good habits that have served you well over the years that have helped grow the business?
Yeah, and I think this relates more broadly than just marketing, but measure, right? don't just especially if we spend lots of money, measure everything as best you can. Right. And I know some stuff is harder. But for me, it's what are the returns? There's always some math. Make sure there's math and have a plan. I think something that I've learned in the last couple of years, and this may not exactly answer your question, but there's a saying, man plans and God laughs. So for years, I just ran with it, right? I didn't really plan. And something like COVID comes, you're like, damn, I wish I had a plan. And now we're a much bigger scale business where we have to put together a 5-year plan. How can we justify scaling wages so much? Where are we going? So it's no matter how smart you are, you're only so smart, have a plan and then, measure against it.
All right. This was great, Jeff. Thanks for sharing. All right, Shawn. Well, that was interesting. Now that he's gone, any thoughts on how he built nuts.com?
Oof, wow. I mean, that's a fire hose.
Yes.
I'm a reasonably good marketer here, but I think that Jeff is next level.
Yeah, it seems really clear, doesn't it, that he really is his own chief marketing officer. He did talk about bringing in advisors, and it's interesting how he chooses to use them and what he uses them for, but he really trusts his own instincts, and that's obviously worked for him. He clearly has good instincts. What do you think of the way he's mixed, going with his gut, making big decisions, placing big bets, but also bringing in experts at certain points?
Yeah, gosh, I think we could have a whole show on this, decision making and risk taking, and where to get help and when to trust your gut. I think the interesting lesson for Jeff here is how he's using his advisor. If you listen carefully on the section about television, he didn't ask an advisor, should I go into TV or not? It was his hunch, right? He was I think this is an opportunity. But what he did is he brought in a guy who knew TV really well to help him accelerate that hunch. And so within 10 days, he's capitalizing on this idea. And I think that's a really important thing to understand if you're a business owner. Am I hiring an advisor to bring new ideas because I need help, kind of innovating and creating new things? Am I hiring an advisor to help pull out good ideas out of me, but I can't quite get them without some help? Or am I hiring an advisor who's really a subject matter expert and is accelerating the idea I already have? And all three are totally legit ways to work with outside help.
Which brings us back to, the whole purpose of these conversations that we've talked about, which is, the notion that there's no one size fits all in terms of marketing strategy. There are all kinds of ways to do this. And, what he's done has worked for him. I would like to think that people could take pieces of this and, maybe take some lessons that they might be able to apply. Mm-hmm. But, not everybody has his instincts. It's tricky. All right. My thanks to Jeff Braverman, Chief Nut of Nuts.com, and to Shawn Busse, Chief Nut of Kinesis. And of course, to our sponsor, The Great Game of Business, which helps businesses implement open book management and employee ownership. You can learn more at greatgame.com. Thanks, Shawn. Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at Loren@21hats.com. That's LOREN at 21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.